Recording for this meeting has begun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Jonah Begay. I'm with the Tel Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, and this is the Domestic Violence Prevention Program series, and today's presentation is about StrongHearts Native Helpline. And we're joined today by Lori Jump and as well as Selena Crichty. In the upper left-hand corner of the screen, we have a chat box for presenter questions and comments, so go ahead and type those in at any time during the presentation. Just below that in the lower left-hand corner is for technical assistance. If you're having trouble seeing the slides, you're not hearing the audio very well, please let us know in that box is right there. Joining us in the background is Elena George and Mary Toledo. We'll try to help you out as best we can. I'm sorry, just myself and Elena George, and we'll try to help you out as best we can. Very lower right-hand corner of the screen is for today's presentation in a PDF format. You can download that at any time by clicking on the title itself. It'll highlight blue. From there, the Download Files button will become active. Click on that. It'll take you to a new window or new tab, and then you can follow the prompts from there. As you can see, we have two files there, and so you will need to click on one download file, click on the other one, and then click on download file. And that'll be the way to go about downloading those the two pieces of material right there. So upcoming dates is right here, and we'll bring this up at the very end as well. But pretty much all the dates that you see here correspond with their blue hyperlink, and so you'll need to register for each date. Just because you register for one doesn't mean you register for them all. And so for each date, you'll need to register for each. You'll need to click on each registration date in order to register for each one. And with that out of the way, I'm going to go and turn things over to Selena at this time.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Selena Crichty, and I am the National Lead for Domestic Violence Prevention Initiative here at headquarters at the Indian Health Service. So today we have a guest speaker, a guest presenter, StrongHearts Native Helpline, and the number to the Native Helpline is listed there, the 18447 Native. And Lori Jump is going to be the presenter, and I'll give Lori the floor in a few minutes just after I say a little bit about StrongHearts. StrongHearts provides an overview of services supporting Native Americans affected by domestic violence and dating violence. And they're actually funded by the National Indigenous and Women Resources. They collaborate with that group, and they are funded by the Children, Youth, and Family and Youth Services Bureau. So they, again, as I mentioned, they're our guest speaker today, and we invited them because they offer really good services to victims of domestic violence, and it's really important because now that we're entering the holiday season, domestic violence does increase. So that's for that reason we wanted to invite StrongHearts and just to let them talk a little bit about what they offer, what they can offer, and the services that they can offer to help your program. So with that, I will let Lori introduce herself and say a little bit about her background, and then she will go into the presentation. And I noticed that we only have like a handful of participants. It's probably because everybody went home. I know I'm probably the only headquarters staff here at IHS presenting or facilitating this call, but pretty much everyone has left home. But I stayed because I really feel that this is really important and that we need to get the word out. So that being said, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Lori.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm going to go ahead. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Lori Jump, and that's what I look like on a good day, not necessarily every day. I am a citizen of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, and I've been doing this work for about 30 years, working in the field of domestic and sexual violence, first for my tribe and then with the state coalition in Michigan, the state tribal coalition in Michigan, and now here with StrongHearts. So to tell you a little bit about StrongHearts Native Helpline, we are a culturally appropriate, confidential, and anonymous helpline for Native Americans impacted by domestic and dating violence. We are a project of two powerhouse nonprofit organizations. We're very lucky. First, we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which has the technology and infrastructure for operating a national helpline. Our second partner is the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, which has the expertise and community connections for working in Indian country. And both of those have been really critical to get us to where we are today. So why a national helpline for Native Americans? Why is that important? We know that American Indian and Alaska Native communities suffer from the highest rates of domestic violence in the United States. A study released by the National Institute of Justice in 2016 revealed that 55% of American Indian Alaska Native women have experienced intimate partner violence. For sexual assault, that rate is 56%. For stalking, it's 48%. And so our rates are very high. And the National Domestic Violence Hotline and the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center started having conversations about 5 years ago to talk about how they could best serve Native Americans, especially due to the high rates. And this helpline is the outcome of all of that work. We launched on March the 6th, 2017, and we've been taking calls from across the country. Today, our objective is just to help you understand what the red flags of domestic violence and dating violence are, to help participants understand the unique barriers that victims in Indian country face, and to help you identify the services that can be helpful to the people that you are working with. Who we serve. We offer culturally appropriate support and resources to anybody that's impacted by domestic violence and dating violence, but we do specifically target American Indian and Alaska Native persons. But at the end of the day, we serve anybody that calls us, right? If somebody's reaching out for help, we don't ever want to, leave them hanging or without the resources they need. So we're going to do our best to find them something, whether they're Native American or not. And our advocates can provide crisis intervention, peer-to-peer support. That peer-to-peer support is really critical. I think, speaking to somebody that's knowledgeable about Indian country and the barriers that we have is really important. Assistance with safety planning. We know that this looks different for everybody because every case is so unique. The issues that people are dealing with are unique to themselves. Information and education is a very important piece. So many people don't know enough about domestic violence and what it really looks like, and many people blame themselves for their situation. So education is really a key piece for us, and referrals to local services when and where those are available. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Our hours right now as a pilot project are limited. We are available Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And for those who call after hours, again, we're not going to leave them hanging. Simply by pressing 1, they have the option to connect to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, who has services available 24 hours, 7 days a week. And of course, they can always call back the next day. So let's talk a little bit about those referrals that I talked about to local services. The very first thing that we worked on when the project was launched was the creation of a database of available services. Those services had to be Native-centered, operated by tribal staff, and in some cases we do include a limited number of mainstream programs that have working relationships, that have memorandums of agreement with tribes to provide those services, and they actually can offer some culturally specific services. So to create our database, it was no small undertaking, really. We literally called every tribe in the country to see how they were working with victims of domestic and dating violence. It took us about a year to complete that work. as you can imagine, when you call a tribe to ask about their services, sometimes there's a little bit of, a hesitation to talk to strangers about what they're doing in their community. And then they don't always have a domestic violence program. It might be somebody working at a behavioral health that's doing the work, or a general victim um, service department dealing with any other types of crime. Some do have native shelters. We work with medical facilities that offer either emergency services or a SANE. And so we have about 282 um, resources right now in our database, which isn't a ton when you consider how big our country is, and that we also include Alaska, which is huge, of course. Um, but we've collected everyone that we know of or that we've heard of, and so of course we're always researching and looking for more programs, and can add them as we find them. So we've been asked to talk a little bit about domestic violence and what it really looks like for us. First of all, it's a pattern of behavior used to maintain power and control over an intimate partner. And it can happen to anybody. A lot of times people think that it's the poor people or those with substance abuse, and that just isn't the case. Can happen to anybody regardless of their status, their education, their income. None of that matters, whether you're rich or poor, whether you have a high school diploma or a college degree, whether you're a tribal leader, or a tribal citizen, whether you're married or not. None of those factors impact um, whether or not somebody can be a victim of domestic violence. Domestic violence takes many forms. Physical abuse is something that we probably all know. It can range from pinching, slapping, punching, biting, restraining somebody, punching walls, throwing things, all of those different types of way to be physical with somebody. Emotional abuse is, that intense jealousy and rages that can happen, criticizing everything about your body, your actions, your emotions, blaming you for their actions, making you think you're crazy, um, constant interrogations about where you were, who you were talking with. Those are all different types of emotional abuse. Sexual abuse is unwanted sexual touching of any sort, making you have sexual activities or, participate in those that you're not comfortable with and don't want to do. It's very difficult to talk about. So when somebody reveals this, it can be a really difficult conversation to have with them. Digital abuse is using electronics to harass, stalk, or intimidate a partner. It can involve threatening or negative messages on your social media, wanting your password so they can see who you're talking to, sending unwanted explicit videos or photos and making you do the same, keeping constant tabs on what you're doing through monitoring your social media, that type of thing. Financial abuse is, controlling the finances in the relationship, keeping their partner dependent, taking, perhaps the money that they are earning, from their own employment, denying you the ability to purchase the things that you need, and it's fairly common. Cultural and spiritual abuse. Our spirituality as Native Americans is at the heart of really who we are, our way of life as a people, and our culture and spirituality are intertwined and provide the foundation really of how we live, the roles that we have in our families and our communities and our sense of well-being. And this can look like, belittling your beliefs and practices, your traditions, um, preventing you from participating in your, in a sweat or um, not allowing you to drum or dance or sing, using hurtful stereotypes, right? You Indians are always drunk, you're stupid, you're lazy, those kinds of things. And, the idea that either you're too Indian or you're not Indian enough, that whole concept of being an apple Indian, red on the outside but white on the inside. This type of abuse really is as personal as it gets, and it can be very damaging to a person. Um, we like to talk about red flags of domestic and dating violence. And yes, there are flags, but there's no literal red flag, right? And so they can be easy to miss, especially in the beginning of a relationship when everything is new and rosy and happy. It's hard to see them. And so when your new partner is wanting to be with you constantly, it feels flattering. It doesn't feel like isolation. Being told that somebody loves you quickly, feels good. When they show up unexpectedly, it's a welcome surprise. But over time, these types of actions can start to take on a darker meaning, and you can look back and say, yeah, I can see those now. Um, Jealousy, rages, wanting to be with you turns into not letting you see your family and friends. Being thoughtful by driving you everywhere turns into not letting you go anywhere. Checking in your mileage to see exactly where you've been. That constant calling and texting, which was, kind of fun in the beginning, can become threatening or harassing. Um, Making jokes about your culture. Um, all of these little things that are flags that we want people to be aware of because they can be indicators of abusive behaviors that might worsen over time. And they start to feel like maybe this relationship isn't all the wonderful things that you thought it was. They can be markers for you to look back on and help you to clarify what's actually happening in your relationship. And they can really be great tools for friends and families that are trying to have a difficult conversation with their loved ones to help them identify potentially abusive behaviors. And so they really can be very helpful in that, when you're trying to figure out what's happening um, in your relationship. Barriers to justice and safety for Native victims and survivors. Every victim or survivor of domestic violence and dating violence has barriers to safety and access to justice. It can be really hard to reach out for help for anybody, but there are some barriers that are unique in Indian country that can make it much more difficult. Um, we are all related, literally, right? Our cousin, our, parent, brother, sister, or worse yet, our abusive partner's relatives. They're the cop, the judge, the doctor, or the victim advocate. It's hard to tell your family what you experience um, what you're experiencing in a relationship, and having your partner's relative be the person that you need to tell can be, lead to disbelief and blaming, right? Nobody wants to think of their family member either experiencing this or being the perpetrator of this type of behavior. So many people just don't reach out for help. Um, Many of us live in a remote area without access to services, transportation. Some tribal communities don't have law enforcement or court systems, so it's hard to access the services that we need. One of the statistics that the NIGA study that I mentioned revealed was that 38% of victims didn't have access to the services that they needed. And, so there's a real service resource disparity in Indian country that makes it difficult. Our tribes don't have shelters or transportations or other programs to help. we only have 282 resources across the entire country, so we have to depend on mainstream programs, which might not be comfortable for us. Oftentimes Native people are more comfortable talking to somebody from that Native community that understands what those barriers are. Here at StrongHearts, we take so many different types of calls. Um, as I said, from across the country, we take calls from victims, of course, but we also take calls from what we call helpers. They're friends and families that are trying to help a loved one. And being anonymous and confidential, it can be hard to share what that might look like. But this is an example of a call that we took recently from a daughter whose mom, a tribal elder, had been in an abusive relationship for years and years. And her mom wasn't ready to leave the relationship. So the caller wanted help in identifying how she could support her mom and help her to be safe while she maintained this relationship. In this case, there was a tribal domestic violence program nearby, but the caller was more comfortable with the anonymous aspect of StrongHearts because she came from such a small, tight-knit community. And that just made it difficult for her to reach out to the program that they did have available in their community. So, what can you do to support victim survivors of domestic and dating violence? First of all, you can refer people to us. 1-844-7-NATIVE is our number. You can share our number and hours in your office. We have some resources, some blogs, and some educational pieces are available at on our website at strongheartshelpline.org. And you can request brochures and posters from us for free. The other thing you can do is, as a service provider, you can reach out to Strong Hearts for assistance as well. If you are working with somebody that has some issues going on, you're welcome to call us to see what resources might be available in your community. If you're not familiar what those might be. You can also ask for help in having that difficult conversation, which can be just really hard to have in our small communities. This slide shows two of the resources that we do have that are available, again, free of charge. One is a tear-off poster with our number and information on it that can be, put up in your office, a waiting room, exam rooms, and then visitors, who see it can simply tear off our number for their use. The other smaller item is what we call a palm card. It's about the size of a credit card and it has our information on it again, as well as just some basic information about domestic violence. And this can easily be handed off to a visitor, a patient. Again, and it's an easy way to either start a conversation or to end that difficult conversation with, providing somebody with an actual resource where they can call for additional help can be very helpful. And again, it's small. It can be easily tucked away into their purse or wallet, for their use if they decide to call us at a later date. Again, these are free of charge if you reach out to us at info@strongheartshelpline.org. We will be more than happy to send you a supply. We'd love to see these in, the exam rooms at every IHS facility or, office areas throughout our tribal nations so that, they're available to help people when they are in need. Here are a couple of resources that might be helpful to you. Again, our partner is the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. They have expertise around policies and programmatic um, setup that they can help with, technical assistance and training, as well as a number of resources on their website. The second is the Safety for Native Women, the Violence Against Women Act in American Indian Tribes. This is a book that's available, easily found on Amazon, and it really tracks what has happened in Indian country around domestic and sexual violence. And it follows the efforts to implement specific legislation to help Native American communities deal with the issues of domestic and dating violence. The Office for Victims of Crime has a technical and training assistance center, and it's located online. You can just Google them; they're very easy to find. And they have an online course for victim assistance training that is free, and it can help you kind of develop the skills for working with victims. That really can apply across the board to the victim of any type of a crime. Um, and I think it's, for people that want to just increase their skill set in working with this population, could be very helpful. Um, so we know, in our traditions, domestic violence and dating violence, were never part of our lifeways, and together we support our relatives. Um, I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any, but this kind of concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Lori. This is Selena.
Yeah.
So if you guys have any questions for Lori, now's the time to ask.
Okay, looks like no questions. I just really want to thank you again for this opportunity to share our information. I hope you'll feel free to reach out either to our hotline or through the info. Okay, we do have a question. Do you have recommendations regarding trainings we can take to our communities and present? Yeah, there are a number of resources that might be available to you. There are, I think currently right now, there are 18 tribal domestic violence and coalitions that are statewide, and they do offer trainings. On the niwrc.org website, there is a page there where you can find those listings of the tribal coalition. So that's one really great resource. And StrongHearts is available to come out and do trainings. Depending upon where you're at, I might be able to recommend specific people that can do those trainings. NIWRC could certainly help with setting up trainings around these issues, and they do work. They're a national resource center, and so they do work across the country as well. So I would recommend reaching out to them for those resources. Okay, another question. Peer-to-peer support, and how does that work? For us, what we are finding on our helpline as compared to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, frequently, I think we spend much more time just talking and validating our callers' experience. It's really important to them to know that they are speaking to somebody that is Native. Our advocates are Native American. We are a project that has been built by and for Native Americans, and so it's really important for us that all of our staff have a really great background in, the history of tribes and the issues that we're suffering in our communities. And just really being able to talk about those from a knowledgeable standpoint where callers don't have to explain what is different, about living and working in tribal communities. It really opens the door, I think, for them to share their experiences. And so, we really just, it's really having a conversation with somebody about where they're at and what they're experiencing. And then, helping them discover maybe what their options are and what they're willing to do. Certainly we believe in empowering our callers. They know best what's happening in their lives. And it's really just exploring what their options are with them, from a I think a mutual place, just really of understanding, Native American culture and traditions. And obviously we know that, um, you know there are so many tribes across the nation, um, that we can't know everybody's traditions and culture, but we can help guide them to finding what those are in their community and what's available. Um, and then another question: what type of trainings are needed to be a peer support? Our advocates go through a really intensive, comprehensive, it's about 14 days of training on, just on domestic violence and sexual assault, and, how those experiences impact a person, as well as, some things about, how to recognize where somebody's at in a desire to make changes in their lives. Um, how to establish rapport with somebody that's calling, how to, safety plan with them, how to, you know, work through difficult situations. So crisis intervention, models, and then of course we really, supplement that with training specific to, Native American communities, and how working with a Native American might be different than working with a non-Native, really understanding the jurisdictional issues that we have in Indian country, understanding our historical trauma and how that can impact somebody today. So there really is, all told, it's a good, probably 17 full days of training before somebody ever gets on a line. We might have them monitor other advocates to see, really how it all works. And before they ever actually get on a phone line to start taking those calls, training is really critical for us. So we invest a lot of time and effort into that. And it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Um, I just really want to thank you for this opportunity to share our resource, and please feel free to contact us. We'd love to help you out in your community in any way we can. And again, we're happy to send materials. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, for really covering what StrongHeart has to offer. Um, this is just a really good program. I wish it was 24 hours, 7 days a week, but I think with limited funding in terms of grant, that's probably why it's less. Um, so I just want to say thank you, to talk about the services that you offer and the peer-to-peer support, the assistance for safety planning, and the educational piece and the referrals, and also all the suggested resources that you had mentioned.
No, thank you. You're welcome. I actually should, if I could mention, I guess, one more thing. We are in the process of moving our operations right now. We are in Austin, Texas, but we are moving our operations to the Twin Cities area in Minnesota. We'll be setting up an office there very soon in the, um, you know, 2 weeks actually. And we will be doing some hiring for that, to hire additional advocates. And we do look forward to increasing our hours somewhat to cover, 7 days a week, till about 10 o'clock at night. And so we are increasing those hours, but again, it is, definitely limited by available funding, and we're always seeking, to increase those operations. So,
Lori, I think you have a couple more questions in the chat box.
yeah, could we still get training for peer support even if it's only used at our workplace? I mean, I think that is, an incredible need, right? In Indian country, I think experienced so many things, and we have so many hardships that we're dealing with in our community. So understanding how to be supportive is a great skill for anybody to have, regardless of where you're working and who you're working with. Um, we don't really offer that as a service, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to reach out to some people to see if there's something that somebody else can offer to you. And what I'll do is I'll shoot it out to Selena, and then maybe she can forward that back to people that were interested in that. The next question is, are there sex trafficking trainings that's related to domestic violence training? This is really a hot topic right now. We don't have a lot of information in Indian country about the sex trafficking that's happening. We know that it's happening, but it's really is not something that has had a ton of money dedicated to it for us to really figure out exactly what's going on. The Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition, MUSAC, they did a small study a couple of years ago. I believe it's called the Garden of Truth. If you wanted to, if you Google it, it's really relatively easy to find. And they also do training around sex trafficking as well. We do know that in some cases it is related to domestic violence. There are definitely cases where partners have trafficked, their partner, and so that is an issue. But again, this is really something that's fairly new in Indian country, and there's not a ton of information out there. I guess I would direct you to the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition for some of their resources.
It looks like we don't have any more questions in the chat box.
No, we don't. So,
all right. So this is going to conclude our webinar. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And I just wanted to say that for our upcoming webinar on December 6th, I think it is December 6th, we're not going to have a webinar that day. I'll send out an email to notify everyone that we're not going to have a session for that day, but we will resume back in January. So everyone have a happy Thanksgiving, and I will talk to you later. Thank you.